Afternoon and good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to score 760 on the GMAT. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Supporting me in this webinar, we have Payal Tanan, who's the other co-founder of e-GMAT, as well as Sandeep, who's a GMAT strategy expert. This is what do you call it, a study plan webinar. It's a GMAT strategy webinar. And the goal of this webinar is that regardless of what your starting point is, regardless of what you want to get, we want to give you a personalized study plan. We want to make sure that you can visualize how you're going to go from your current score, whether it's a 500 or a 550 or a 600 or a 670 or even a 700, to your target score. Again, the target score could range from a 700 to a 770 or so. We will solve one question in this webinar, and the purpose of that question will be to make sure that we illustrate how should you study. And to make sure that you're prepared for that question, we did send a couple of video lessons your way. The video lessons that were most relevant for that question are the verb BD modifiers as well as the verb ing modifiers. If you've not gone through them, those video lessons are a part of your free trial. Before we start the webinar, I want to make sure that you're aware of a few upcoming webinars. We have a subject matter webinar on algebra. That webinar is tomorrow. In that webinar, we're going to talk about how can you solve the most challenging passages of inequalities and absolute values. That's tomorrow, 3rd of November, 7 a.m. Pacific time. And again, remember 7 a.m. Pacific time, because of daylight saving time, is 8 a.m. Is actually 10 a.m. Eastern, and then again 8:30 p.m. IST. Next Saturday, which is the 9th of November, we have a free webinar on how to use GMAT sentence correction. It's probably our most popular webinar. In this, we outline the meaning-based approach. If you aim to score in the 90th percentile on the GMAT, if you're aiming for that high ability, if you're stuck at that 60th percentile, this webinar will help you get to that 90th percentile. It'll tell you what's important to get there. With that, let's get some insights about it. About 100 students in this webinar right now want to figure out when do you plan to take the test. Based on the data that I have over here, what I see is that that essentially we have fairly evenly divided group. We have a few folks who plan to take their test right away. That's about 11 of you. But other than that, I have more than 20 people in each and every segment, including those who haven't taken a date as of yet. That's wonderful. With that, let's go right into the webinar pane. The screen will have or will be in the process of changing for you. Let me get some more data about you. So we're talking about your GMAT score. So let's figure out what your target GMAT score is. So select one of the options in this poll. All right, let's get a few more responses. I have 55, 56, 58, 60. Let's get to 65 responses. Then I'll broadcast the results. 65, that's wonderful. So target GMAT scores, the biggest segment over here is in that 730 to 750. A lot of people in the 710, 720, but 20% of the class in the 760 or higher bracket. And we have a few folks in the 600 to 700 bracket. So one thing that I want to do in this webinar is, or rather, a couple of things, is essentially I want to make sure that those of you who are in that 710, 720 bracket, they convince you to put in that extra effort to get to that score of 730 or higher. And I'm going to give you 3 reasons why you should do that. And I'll also explain why a score of 700 is not enough. If you are in that 730 or higher bracket, I want to make sure I give you good reasons to put in that hard work, because trust me, as you're preparing for the GMAT, your brain will tell you to give up. It will say it's too hard. It'll question what's the value of getting those extra 10, 20, or 30 points on the test when you already have that 700 score. So this mini section for the next 7 to 8 minutes, we're going to really talk about why should you aim for the score of 730 or higher, and why is it that in the world that we live in today, a score of 700 is not enough. And At a very high level, there are essentially three reasons. First is if you're aiming for a top B school, which I believe most of you should aim for, those B schools require now more or less, a score of 730 or even higher. I'm going to show data to back that claim. The other piece is, more than 50% of the huge scholarship kitty that goes to students who are going to score 730 or higher. And overall, when you do the math, and I'm going to do the math for you, that the total difference in earnings over a 10-year period between someone who scores a 700 and then a 730, arguably, is the highest it has ever been. It's upwards of $500,000. So 30 points could result in $500,000 of delta over that 10-year period. That's something that, for many of you, this is something that could be true. But essentially, before we do that, let's get some more data points over here and see, how do you plan to fund your MBA? I mean, what's your thought around this? It's always nice to know this as when you have a group uh, this as big as what we have over here. As how do you plan to fund your MBA? Are you going to pay for it yourself? Will you take a loan? Are you going to rely on scholarships? Is this a company-sponsored MBA for you, or is there some other option? All right, let me end the poll. I have 68 responses. Essentially, 80% of the classes in that either taking a loan or relying on scholarship, which I mean, if you're going to take a loan, you might as well aim for a scholarship. Only 10% of you are aiming to pay for it yourself. Presumably, do an executive or a part-time MBA, and then a few folks in the other group as well. So, reason one, top B schools now require, why should you aim for that score of 730 or higher? Why? Because top B schools require that high GMAT score. And if you look at this data over here, this table really talks about the median GMAT scores at B schools. And you're going to notice two things. One is Harvard and Stanford are not here. Why? Because those schools already have among really high median GMAT scores. But what has happened over the last 4 years, in fact, this trend has continued into 2019 as well, based on the data that we are seeing, that that median scores at top B schools have gone up. And at Kellogg, you can really see that it's gone up from 713 to 732. At Haas, it's gone from 717 to 726. I mean, they're all going towards that 730 mark. In fact, based on the research done by Poets and Quants, for 23 out of the top 25 schools, that median score has increased. For the 24th school, it has remained the same, and that median score is fairly high as well. And for only one school, that number has come down. In fact, for certain schools, and the two schools that I'm going to point out over here, and median means 50% of the class, but for schools such as MIT Sloan, as well as Columbia, more than 80% of the admitted class has scores of 700 or higher. Essentially, what these schools are telling you is if you don't have a score of 700, don't even bother applying. And the thing which is there is this has happened despite, and I use the word despite, the fact that the GMAT test taking population across the same time has gone down. So by about 15% or so. So there were more test takers in the year 2014. There were fewer in the year 2018, and yet the median scores have essentially gone up. So it's clearly showing the trend that B schools today prefer higher GMAT scores. And there's a quote by Mark Ether, who's the managing editor at Poets and Quants. He says the bottom line remains that only the best of the best have a shot of getting into any of these schools. And this is against he said this in the context of these increasing median scores. Now, this trend doesn't end up over here. If you look at beyond 25 also, you see a very, very similar trend where, schools such as Rice, USC Marshall, and a bunch of others have seen huge increases in median scores. They're not 730. Other Northwestern Kellogg shouldn't be there, but that's essentially the biggest 5-year increases. The table says where have we seen the biggest 5-year increases in the average GMAT score? if you look at this, Michigan and Kellogg are the only ones that are in top 25. The other four schools are beyond 25 um, over here. Again, you can take a look at this article. So this is statistical data. Now there's some good anecdotal data for this as well. So from a lot of e-GMATers. So for those of you who don't know about e-GMAT, we get about 10,000 paying students every year. Our students get about $18 million or more in estimated scholarship amounts. And so we get a lot of data from our students, and here's some anecdotal data for you. Here's one of our students, Nishant. He scored a 690 on the GMAT. He was rejected by Tuck, Penn State, Broad, and Rotman. This was R2. In R3, he got a 740. He got a full fellowship from Ohio Fisher. He is currently studying at Columbia. He also got an admit from Columbia. So he reached out to the schools that rejected him, and two schools gave him feedback, and they were Tuck and Smeal, and they said, hey, we like your candidacy, but your GMAT score was bad. So that's why he took the GMAT again, improved to that 740. Another student, Pravi, she got a 680. She applied to many schools with a 680. She did not hear from them. And then within the same round, she got a 740. So she applied with a 680. She got a 740 within R2. She sent that 740 to these schools, and within hours, and it was but between 7 to 8 hours, she received 4 interview invites. I mean, you get one interview invite. That could be a coincidence, but you get 4 invites within hours. That's not a coincidence. She was admitted to Georgetown. She got scholarship from Georgetown and UCLA Anderson, and she got an admit from Kellogg, which was her dream school. She's currently studying at Kellogg. And this story Krishnakant's story is actually probably the most telling story. With a 680, he was rejected by Simon, Foster, Rotman, and McGill. Again, 680 is a good score if you think about it. In R2, he was rejected. He improved that score to 720. And he applied in R3. R3, when the chances of admission, are very slim. He got full fellowships in R3 from round 3 from Georgia Tech, WP Carey, Texas A&M. He's currently studying at Georgia Tech. Again, you can look these people up. They are all on LinkedIn. And so essentially, what this tells you is that your GMAT score today is more important than it has ever been. And I can tell you from my personal experience, a score of 700 when I took the GMAT was considered to be really good. The only reason why you would score higher or aim for a higher score is if you wanted a fellowship. The are many more reasons today to score higher than what they were 6-8 years back. The second reason, which is probably the most important reason for many of you who plan to take a loan or are relying on scholarships, is that the scholarship kitty that B schools are awarding today is the highest it has ever been, in about 350 million, and 50% of those scholarships go to students who score 730 or higher. Can someone tell me, I'm going to put in a short answer pod, how much money does Harvard give out? Let me see if I can get my short answer pod over here. How much money does Harvard give out every year in scholarships? Or what's the average scholarship amount that a Harvard student gets? Let's see. Okay. All right. So some good answers. Harvard has a total scholarship kitty every year of I think about $37 to $38 million. The average scholarship amount annually that a student gets is about $48,000. So over 2 years, you're looking about $96,000 of scholarship money. That's the median scholarship money. Many people who get full fellowship, others who don't, but the median scholarship amount is around that 45 to 50 grand annually. So fairly good amount. So talked about the total scholarship kitty. This is the merit-based scholarships that are awarded by USB schools. Now, even though we're talking just about USB schools, if you're aiming for European B schools, their scholarship kitty is not as big, but it is the largest that it has been over the years. And there also the same principle applies. And based on our estimates, and these are our estimates based on what we've seen from e-GMATers, 55% of that money is going to go to students who score 740 or higher, and about 80% of that is going to go to students who get 710 or higher. So again, you're looking at 6,000 versus about 20,000 students over there. And if you do the math, what you're going to really find is, if you score 740 or higher, that's the average scholarship amount overall. And based on our research, there are two factors that decide scholarship. One is your GMAT score. Second is your likability during the interview. And here's some anecdotal data around this. One is, one of our students, Mansi Diman, she scored a 770 on the GMAT as she's received $90,000 worth of scholarship from Harvard. Second guy, Victor Makula, he scored a 770. Again, he got $142,000 worth of scholarship. He got a full fellowship from Ross and Keenan Flagler. He's currently studying at Wharton. Again, you can watch their interviews. You can see what they did to get those scholarships. And the third guy, Kong Bu, he scored a 760. He not only received a full fellowship, but he received $1,700 every month to study at Ohio Fisher. He actually got 4 full fellowships overall. And again, you've seen the data for these guys as well, and you can see their scholarship amounts that go along with these. And here's a quote from uh, Tom, who's a former admissions director at Ross. He says someone with a 770 is much more likely to get a financial reward than someone with a 670. Um, it can be much more likely for that business school to want to buy that high GMAT score. Okay. The third reason, and probably the biggest factor over here, let me get another poll over here. What anyone's following the median salaries at top B school, what is the median salary that Harvard had just released? So what do students at Harvard get as their median salary? Median salary, not including the bonus, because bonus usually is one time. So this I care more about the median salary, but not the one-time bonus that people get. All right. Let me share the results. You can see the numbers over here. The median salary at Harvard is about 148K. That number just came out just 12 hours back. It was released by Poets and Quants, and again, it was released by Harvard as well. That number increased by $8,000 over over the prior year. Again, you see the median salaries go up. Now, a lot of you may say, "Hey, but how does it matter to me if I don't get into Harvard? If I'm aiming for a school such as Kellogg or a GSP Chicago or a Wharton or Columbia, or one of those." Because when you see an increase at Harvard, most of the companies that actually go to Harvard also go to these schools. So you see a corresponding increase over there as well. And so to really look at 700 versus 730 or high, I'm going to compare two schools, Babson and MIT. And there's a reason why I compare them is because they're both co-located. They're located 20 miles away from one another. So if you're going to if you're going to go to Boston, you could be studying at one of these schools. And so students over there presumably will have the same cost of living. They'll actually have similar access to opportunities. If you look at the median base salaries at these two schools, it's very different. The average bonus amounts, yes, they're different, but these are one-time bonuses. Um, and uh, and again, so when you look at their total compensation, it's the delta is about $60,000. Even if you take that delta to be $45,000 to be conservative over a 10-year period, and you assume that delta to remain constant, you're going to look at two schools, delta of about $450,000. And again, I'm not taking this was Boston. I think it's a reasonable place to take when it comes to representing the US. It's not New York, it's not San Francisco where salaries are crazy high, but also the cost of living is correspondingly high. Boston, I think, is a good metro to live in, and the cost of living is not crazy high over there. And the thing which is really important is that delta 10 years ago when I did my MBA, I'm a Babson grad, by the way, I got a full fellowship. That delta wasn't that high. 10 years ago, the median salary out of Babson was about 90,000. The median salary out of MIT was about 117,000. But what you can really see is, how that delta has increased and is increasing more and more. So again, the three reasons why you should aim for that higher GMAT score. You can really see that. And again, the key thing which is there is if you aim to get into a top business school, which you truly should today, don't settle for a 700. Put in that extra effort, incremental effort, and get those additional 30 points because they could be worth a fortune. So now that we know the importance of that GMAT score, hopefully most of you who are in that 710 to 720 bucket are now motivated towards that 730 score because, hey, it's 20 points more. It's a huge ROI. Let's talk about how do you ace the GMAT. And the thing that I want you to remember when it comes to acing the GMAT is acing the GMAT is all about ability. Okay. And why do I want you to focus on this? Because when a lot of people think about acing the GMAT, the things that come to their mind are, timing, exam strategy. What am I going to choose to attempt? Can I sustain myself through that 3 hour long exam and so on and so forth? These are important, but they're actually their relative importance when it comes to building ability is actually much lower. And I'm going to talk about that. And to do that, I'm going to look at how does the GMAT work, and we're going to look at this trend of accuracy versus ability. And just for definition, what's accuracy? You take a quiz, it's a 10-question quiz, you actually get 8 out of them correct. Yeah, accuracy is 80%. So the percentage of questions that you get correct. When you use the word accuracy, you actually don't pay any importance to the difficulty level of questions served to you. Ability is a comparative number. It tells you how good you are compared to the other folks who are taking the test. Okay, so let's kind of look at this. So what we're going to do is we're going to simulate the GMAT attempt for two students, and we're going to call them case 1 and case 2. On the x-axis, you have question numbers from 1 to 6. On the y-axis, you have difficulty level of questions. Now, this is a generic simulation of a computer adaptive test. The GMAT has a bit more sophisticated algorithm, but it's a good representation in principle of how the GMAT works. So student 1 or case 1 gets the first question. The first question usually is around that median difficulty level. So he gets the first question right. He gets a second question, which is of a higher difficulty level, gets that right as well, then gets the third question, which is of an even higher difficulty level. So as you answer questions correctly, the difficulty level increases. That's the principle of a computer adaptive test. Gets the third question wrong, gets the fourth question, which is of a slightly lower difficulty level. And if you want to just do the precision part, you can really see if you draw straight lines between question number 2 and question number 3. Question number 4 is between question number 2 and question number 3. Let's remove that. He gets question number 4 right, gets the fifth question, slightly higher difficulty level. Question number 5 answers it correctly. So what you really see is the test is actually trying to approximate as to where this guy would be. Case 2 or student 2 got the first question, again, similar difficulty level, got that wrong. Got the second question, lower difficulty level, got that right. Got the third question, slightly higher difficulty level, got that wrong. The difficulty level reduced for question number 4, he got that right. And he got the fifth question right as well. Okay, so if I were to really end the test at this point, so if you were to really just finish the test over here before question number 6 is served, who do you think would be doing better if we ended the test at question number 6? Before question number 6, that is. Who do you think would be doing better? Let's get a few more responses. I have 122 students here. The question is, if I ended the test at question number 6, who would be doing better? Okay. Again, make a judgment. Let's get a few more. I have 63 responses, 67, 69, 70. Okay, good. So the broadcast results, 77% of you think student one's doing better. 23% of you think student two is doing better. Let's talk about the 77% who think student one's doing better. Why do you think that is the case? Why do you think student one's gonna get a higher score if I were to end it? Yes, he's answered questions of higher difficulty correctly. He's answered questions of higher difficulty. That is correct. That is the cause. I'm so happy you guys are saying that. A lot of people really, when in the past, when I've asked this question, uh, uh, many a times the answer that I get is because you got the first few questions right. Yes, that's an observation. It's not the causality. The causality is because he's answered more difficult questions correctly, and that is the real reason. Okay, if you look at it, if you observe, the accuracy for both the cases is identical. Both of them got 3 out of 5 questions correctly. And if you observe even more closely, what you're going to find is case one got 5 questions. Each one of them was either at the average difficulty level or above the average difficulty level. Case two got only 1 question, which was at the average difficulty level. Okay. So bottom line, the thing that you have to take away from this is your GMAT score is governed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. And for you to be able to answer difficult questions correctly, A, you need to have the ability to do that. B, you have to tell the test that, hey, I am able to solve difficult questions, so serve difficult questions to me. So the first challenge is to get those difficult questions served to you. The second challenge is that you need to answer those correctly. And this is a very profound point. I want to make sure that you make note of this. Why? Because as you're studying something, what really happens is we tend to get into the habit of saying, hey, I'm going to finish this, I'm going to finish this quickly and do something else. And at times when that happens, we try and rush through things. Remember this. The merit of studying something on the GMAT is only there if you study it well. Why? Because you need to be able to solve difficult questions correctly. So this was just in principle. Now I'm going to show you some real use cases. And this data is about 2 years old when you had the older GMAT prep. This is the verbal section of the GMAT, 41 questions. And what you see are rectangles that are shaded and not shaded. And 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 the rectangles that are shaded are the question numbers on which the student made mistakes. And what you see over here is that two students whose attempts are very similar. The only difference between them is this guy got the first 2 questions wrong over here. But other than that, their accuracy in between question numbers 11 and 41 is identical. Now, if you look at their scores, you're going to find they're very different. Student 2 got a verbal score of 32 out of 60. Student 1 got a verbal score of 43. A verbal score of 43 is 97th percentile on the GMAT. A verbal score of 32 is 65th percentile on the GMAT. And if you look at the ranks, there's a difference of about 64,000 students between them. How many of you are thinking, man, 2 questions and a difference of 64,000 students, the GMAT is really unfair. It's a very strict test. How many of you are thinking that? Actually, you know what? Let's get a yes no poll over here. Maybe that's a much better way. I want you guys to take a position here. How many of you think GMAT's really harsh? How many of you think GMAT's not harsh? How many of you think GMAT's really harsh? This is really severe. 2 questions and the difference, such a huge difference in rank. How many of you are saying no, the GMAT's not severe. This is a fair representation of what the scoring needs to be. Again, take a stand. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong. What matters is that you take a stand. Why? Because if you're right, your beliefs would be reinforced. If you're wrong, you're going to learn something. The only thing is if you don't take a stand, that's when you're not going to learn. This is not going to embed in your brain. Okay, I have 79 responses, 81 responses. Let's get a few more. 84, 85. Let me end the poll, broadcast the results. 65% of you think GMAT's really harsh when you do this, and 35% of you think it's not harsh. So let's kind of hear from the 65% and who said GMAT's really harsh. Why do you think it's the GMAT's harsh? Those who said yes, why do you think the GMAT's really harsh for punishing student 2? There's no time here. Okay. So the GMAT's, how is the GMAT harsh? Just 2 questions wrong can't decide that, okay? Because it's judging on too small a sample size, all right? Every step is crucial, all right? Okay, here's what's funny about this, when I show this data to people, a lot of people say, okay, GMAT's really harsh because I make 2 mistakes and I get to that 65 percentile score. Very few people, very few people are happy about looking at this over here on the left hand side guy who got a 97 percentile and think, man, out of 41 questions, I could make 9 mistakes and I could still get a 97 percentile. This is such an amazing test. Right? I mean, how many tests have you appeared in where you make 9 out of 41? So round about 23%, get 23% of the questions wrong and still get 97 percentile. How many tests have you attempted? It's actually less than 80% accuracy if you do the math. But yes, and that's the beauty of the GMAT, which is that you can make mistakes on the test. You can still get a high score as long as you make mistakes on the difficult question. And let's kind of simulate this. The reason we talked about this principle of a computer adaptive test is so that you can understand this. And we're going to simulate both these students over here. Student 2, we're going to look at the guys who got V32, got the first question. The first question was of a median difficulty level, 50th percentile question. Okay, he got that wrong. He got the second question, which hypothetically could be between 25th to 30th percentile level. He got that wrong as well. What is the probability? What is the probability that a student who's a 90th percentile student would get first a 50th percentile question wrong and then a 30th percentile question wrong? Those of you who are quant whizzes over here, what is the probability? It's actually, if you look at the bell curve and you say 90th percentile, that probability would be less than 1 in 10,000, that joint probability of getting those 2 questions wrong. Okay, I can see what the results are. So a lot of things that people infer from this is, so initially people should be extra cautious so they won't spare extra time, so won't the extra time matter. So first of all, if you are a 90th percentile guy, you're not going to make mistakes on this. That's the definition of a 90th percentile guy. Okay, it's like for a 90th percentile guy to essentially get a 50th percentile question is as easy as Ronaldo hitting a penalty against a rookie goalkeeper. By definition, if you're a 90th percentile guy, you shouldn't get them wrong. Okay. Now, both these students were e-G matters. These are two different students, e-G matters. The guy on the left who got a V43 in the GMAT prep actually ended up getting a V44 on the actual test. The guy on the right ended up getting a V35. So when you think about the estimates that GMAT prep made, which is what it used to be called, now it's called the official GMAT test. Uh, the estimates weren't very off. They were very within reasonable degrees. Their ability levels were very different. So when you think about the GMAT doesn't care as much about your accuracy. What the GMAT cares about are your abilities. And to really look at their abilities, these are how the ability scores look for these two students. The 97 percentile student had really high abilities in SCCR and RC. And these are ability estimates that the GMAT does internally. The 65th percentile student had these ability estimates. Saurabh says, but I got a super difficult question on my last GMAT attempt as per the ESR. That would be there. So we'll talk about how would you build ability, and we'll address Saurabh's question, which is a really great question. But first of all, for those of you who are worried about accuracy, when you think about these ability numbers, does that make sense to you? Do you think these people are very different if you measure them against their relative abilities? Do you think when you look at the ability charts, they look very different? And that's what the GMAT looks at. Okay. So the thing that I want to really take away from this is acing the GMAT is about building ability, and everything else is actually secondary. Okay. Now, Saurabh had a question. He says, I got a super difficult question on my last attempt as question number one, almost 95th percentile. So Saurabh, first of all, send me your ESR. I'd like to really see that. But yes, in about 4% of the cases, and I've looked at upwards of 1,000 ESRs, you're going to get a super difficult question in the first as the first question itself, and that happens because the randomness, which is the deterministic randomness. Again, I'm sorry for using a technical term, but because of the deterministic randomness that exists on the GMAT. In that case, if you make that mistake, it doesn't matter. Why? Because most people are supposed to get that question wrong. The problem happens when you make a mistake on an easy question. And Tommaso also says, again, the thing which is there is the goal of this discussion was not to really say, hey, pay more attention to the first questions. Absolutely, that would be the wrong takeaway from this. The goal of this was to really say buildability. And Tommaso says, what if you answer wrong the first set of questions, then you answer difficult questions correctly? So, Tommaso, the way the GMAT works is if it creates a reliable estimate of of your ability to be lower, then it doesn't serve you difficult questions. Remember, and so that's a great question over here. Let's go back a couple of slides. When we talked about the challenges to ace the GMAT, I'm going to focus your attention to these two challenges. Challenge one was to get difficult questions served to you. If you make mistakes on easy questions, you're going to find you won't get difficult questions served to you. And then the second challenge was to answer them correctly. Okay. But yes, you can make mistakes on a couple of easy questions and still make up for it. I mean, that's the whole definition of a computer adaptive test. But essentially, if you have the ability, you're not likely to make those mistakes on easy questions. I mean, that's kind of how the whole mathematics works. And that's why, I mean, the GMAT is a test which all the other tests, the SAT, the ACT, the GRE have been trying to emulate. The GRE was never adaptive early on. Now they've made it pseudo-adaptive. They're actually moving away more and more away from the vocab aspect of it, the pure vocab aspect of it, and trying to make it much more trying to make it a better predictor of your success at grad school. Why? Because they're trying to make it more like the GMAT. So then if GMAT's a test of ability, then you've got to really say, hey, how do you build ability? But to figure out How do you build ability? You have to really decide what abilities does the GMAT measure. Okay, so when you think about that score of out of 800, uh, uh, that score of 800 is composed of two scores, your quant score and your verbal score. Both of these are measured out of on two scales. One is out of 60, which you see over here, or it's measured out of 100 as a percentile. On the quant side, you have two abilities. You have arithmetic and algebra geometry. On the verbal side, you have three abilities, SC, CR, and R. So you have sentence correction, critical reasoning, and reading comprehension. So, and all of these abilities are scored out of 60 or out of 100. And I like the measure out of 100 because it tells me my relative rank. Out of 60, I mean it's again, there's a one-on-one mapping, so it's an equivalent measure, but out of 100 allows me to really visualize this much more clearly. Why? Because when I think of 760 out of 800, I think of it as 99th percentile, or I tell myself I'm in the top 1 percentile of students. Similarly, when I think of sentence correction ability as 94th percentile, it tells me that I'm in the top 6 percentile of students worldwide who are taking the test in sentence correction. So how does scoring work? So on the official test, you're going to see 5 independent engines, and they actually calculate these abilities independently. This is something that we've concluded based on our research. And these are the 5 abilities that you see at the bottom. Now, combining performances from these abilities, your quant and verbal scores are calculated. A lot of you think about your quant and verbal scores, but essentially you should worry about these abilities. Why? Because those quant and verbal scores, and then your individual the GMAT score out of 800, these are mere outcomes of what happens here and what happens here. Okay, so when you're thinking about your GMAT score, ask yourself, what ability scores am I aiming for in these subsections? And again, let's kind of think about how do we think about this? But the takeaway that I want to really say, which is where I started this part, was that when it comes to building the GMAT, focus on building ability first. As you build ability, you're going to find a bunch of these things at the bottom, which are over here. They take care of it themselves. If you start worrying about timing and exam strategy and all of that in the middle of your preparation or in the beginning of your preparation, you're going to find that you won't build ability. So we talked about the principle on how the GMAT works. We talked about GMAT prep data point. Now we're going to look at the actual GMAT data point of a student who improved from a 520 to a 710. Okay, here is his ESR, and this guy has actually shared his ESR. But again, the thing that I want you to look at is that verbal score of 40, which is where a majority of his improvement came from, is built of 3 abilities, one each in SC, CR, and RC. And you can see he was 94th percentile in sentence correction, 79th percentile in critical reasoning, and 73rd percentile in reading comprehension. And again, you can see his debrief. So the nice thing about this is when you click on his debrief, which Sandeep would be happy to share, you're going to really can download his ESR. But again, as you look at his ESR, the myth of accuracy is going to be busted, where this guy made a ton of mistakes. But again, he first made sure that he answered easy and medium questions correctly. Here, he continued to do that. And towards the end, when he was served with hard questions, he made mistakes, but he wasn't penalized on making mistakes. So, Tommaso, you're asking that question. What happens if you make mistakes on a difficult question? You're not penalized as much as you can see in blocks 3 and blocks 4 over here. The guy got half the questions wrong over here. He was still able to get to a V40, which is 91st percentile on GMAT verbal. So again, when it comes to acing the GMAT, it's about building ability. So let's kind of look at, now that you know that acing the GMAT is about building ability, how do you build an ability-driven personalized study plan? Okay. So first of all, let me ask this question. What does a study plan do? What's the role of a study plan? And again, try to put in as much detail as possible. When you think about building a study plan, what does a study plan do? Or what should a study plan do? And try to be as elaborate as possible. And as you put in those your answers, I do get them, but you don't see them because I'm not broadcasting the results. So when I get about 25 responses, I'm going to broadcast the results. So you're gonna get the opportunity to read everyone's responses. I'm getting some really good responses. Okay. All right. 18 responses so far. 24, 25. Let me broadcast results. So some really good responses. I'm going to talk about one response and where did it go. Yeah, there was a response that says what to do, when to do, how to do it, and how much time. Let's see who put in that response. Man, that response went away. Where did it go? What to do, how to do. Yeah, UV. Yes, really good response. A study plan should tell you what to do, how to go about it, what aspects should you need to study, and how much time should you put behind it. Okay. So essentially, a study plan should answer these questions. So how will I reach my target GMAT score? What is the journey I'm going to take to get there? That's probably the most important question that a study plan should answer. And then the second piece is to get there, how much time should I be putting in each of the segments that compose my target GMAT, that contribute to my target GMAT score? And then it's not just how much time and where and how the path, but it also needs to be where. And I'm going to talk about all three questions by taking a case study. So we're going to take two students. We're going to call them Abby and Chase. So Abby is someone who's better in verbal than in quant comparatively, I would say. She's a more balanced quant versus verbal split, around 50th percentile in both quant and verbal. Um, so it's slightly better in verbal than in quant. Chase, on the other hand, is much stronger in quant. Now, both Abby and Chase are aiming for a score of 740. Both Abby and Chase are starting from a score of 600. So this is what we are looking at over here. Do you think the study plans are going to be similar? No, okay. All right, everyone's saying no, that's really good. Well, let's kind of look at this. Some of you are saying not sure. Let's look at this. So let's define their starting points a bit more uh, cohesively. Let's add a bit more data. Now, remember I said when it comes to the GMAT, it's built of 5 abilities. We call them subsectional abilities. If you read your ESR, that's what the ESR also calls them. So Chase, better than Quant, has a 72 percentile ability in arithmetic and algebra, and 42 percentile ability in for Abby. That those numbers are 42%. I took the numbers to be similar, so that I think it's you don't have to remember that many numbers. And for verbal, Abby has around the 60th percentile in each of these subsections, and Chase is around the 35th percentile. Again, we tried to keep the numbers similar, so you don't have to remember so many numbers, but these numbers could be very different depending on what you're good in and what you're not so good in. So the three questions that a study plan needs to answer is, do Abby and Chase need to achieve the same quant and verbal scores to get to a score of 740? Is that the most efficient way? Let's get in a yes no poll over here. Do they need the same quant and verbal scores to get to a 740? Should they aim for the same quant and verbal scores? No, they shouldn't. We're going to really look at what quant and verbal scores should they aim for to get to a 740. Now, do they need to put in the same amount of effort on both quant and verbal to achieve their target scores? So really important question. Do they need to put in the same amount of effort to get to their target scores? Let's get a few more responses, guys. The question is, do both, and hypothetically, do both of them need to spend, let's say, 4 weeks on quant, 4 weeks on verbal to get to their target score? Or is Abby going to spend less time on verbal and more time on quant, or more time on verbal and less time on quant? All right. I think a lot of people are not sure. I got about 46 responses for this one. And then the third piece, which is the often most ignored piece. When they're studying quant and verbal, are they studying the same content? When they're studying sentence correction, when they're studying critical reasoning, when they're studying number properties, when they're studying word problems, are they studying the same content? All right. Everyone's saying no. The answer to this is no. Yes, we're going to really look at that. But the first thing is, if you want to create a personalized study plan, you can go to GMAT Planner. You can schedule a consult with one of our GMAT strategy consultants, and they'll tell you, create that precise study plan for you. So let's kind of look at this. So we're going to focus first just on Abby over here. You can really see this. So for Abby, okay, for Abby, this is the output of GMAT Planner. This is exactly how the GMAT Planner provides as output in one of its intermediate steps. Remember, her quant score was Q42, her verbal score was V31. You had her starting abilities over here, 42% percentile abilities in arithmetic and algebra, and around the 68th percentile on the verbal side. For her to get to a target score of 740, the most optimum way is if she gets to a V42 and a Q48, which means around the 65th percentile in quant and around the 90th percentile on the verbal side of things. Okay, that's something which she needs to aim for. So keep those numbers over there, because it's going to be really important for you to do this as you compare. Now, the next thing you have to figure out is, where does Abby spend her time? And let me just zoom it in a bit more. Some of you are using a mobile devices as you're connecting to this. So Abby is going to spend 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks on each subsection of verbal. Of course, this depends on the number of hours she's putting in. So this math was done based on Abby putting in about 20 hours every week. So she's spending between 45 to 50, 40 to 50 hours on every subsection. And then on the quant side of things, okay, she's spending about 25 to 30 hours on each subsection over here. Now, this may be surprising to you. Why? Because you may think that Abby is weaker in quant, so she should spend more time on quant. Am I correct? Were some of you wondering, hey, Abby is weaker in quant, so Abby should study quant a lot more rather than verbal? How many of you are thinking that, or how many of you thought that, okay, if Abby is weaker in quant, she's going to spend way more time on quant? But the key thing which is there is, what do you need to do to get to that score of 740? And what's your strategy driven by? So all of us know Google, right? So does anyone look at Google's financial statements? Is anyone a financial analyst over here? Anyone a financial analyst that looks at? So yes, Tofik is. So Tofik, if you're a financial analyst, you can put in yes over here. I think many of you are not. I do understand that. Where does Google put most of their R&D dollars? Where does Google put most of its R&D dollars? Or their, however. Okay, on their ad business. Project X and Google X Labs is not where they put. They put a significant amount, but not a majority. That's still about 15% of their R&D. But the biggest amount of of the R&D dollars, if you look at their financial statements, is spent on their ads business. Okay, and then R&D, not pure research, research and development. And the reason for that is it accounts for the largest share of revenue. It accounts for close to 90% of Google's revenue today. Okay, so in the same way, Abby is going to get, if you look at that 740 score, 70% of that score is accounted by from her verbal performance. And she needs to maximize that strength. So the principle over here is a strategy to maximize your score is to make sure that you maximize your strength while you have the headroom for it. Okay. And then the whatever energy you have left, focus on your weakness. And that's the most optimum way. So keep this in mind. We're going to compare this again. So Chase, target quant and target verbal scores. Again, remember, Chase was really strong in quant. So his quant score was Q49, verbal score was V23. He was at that 72 percentile over here. So for Chase, if he wants to get there, he should improve to Q50 and a V40. Now, some of you may be thinking that, okay, if Chase has to improve to a V40, he is kind of very similar to Abby. But for those of you who have studied quant and verbal both, you're going to realize when you get to that 90th percentile or that 85th percentile, improvement becomes that much more difficult. More specifically, why? Because you've been doing that journey from that V23 to V40. It already takes a toll on you, a mental toll on you, not a physical one. Okay, but he should definitely strengthen his quant first. Make sure he gets to that Q50 so that he maximizes that. Okay, there's very little headroom available over there, and then focus on improving the verbal piece. And yes, Ayush, we get lots and lots of chases. We will definitely help you. But then where does Chase spend his time? You can really see that Chase does spend some time on quant, but he spends, again, a majority of his time on verbal. But let's kind of do a comparison over here. And you can really see for Chase versus Abby, the target quant score and the target verbal scores are different. Now, a Q48 and a Q50 are very different scores, even though you see the difference is just 2 points. But if you extrapolate it to percentiles, you're going to find they're two very different people and require very different preparation levels. The other piece which is there is if you accumulate the amount of time that is spent, Chase is going to spend 9 weeks on verbal, whereas Abby is going to spend 6 weeks on verbal over here. I want you to focus on this piece. And I want you guys to answer, if you are Chase and if you try and achieve what Abby is achieving, what the same scores as Abby does, or that 90th percentile score in 6 weeks versus 9, what happens to how you study? And again, listen to this question very carefully. If you are Chase, and I think we had a Chase over here, and if you're asked to achieve a much higher score improvement in 50% less time, 9 weeks versus 6 weeks is 50% less time, then what happens, or how does it impact how you study? How does it impact? Don't you rush through things? Don't you really every day go into studies and think, I have a lot to finish, I have to do this, right? When you rush through things, then what happens to your to how you study? Do you still seek the same perfection, or are you looking to complete things out? No, you don't seek the same perfection. Why? Because you're saying, I have so much to study and I have just 6 weeks. Yes, it leads to inefficient preparation. And that is why it's really important to get those estimates right in the first place. Because more often than not, when you go outside and ask for a study plan, no one looks at this data and gives you that study plan. They really say, hey, study from this resource, study from that resource, and blah, 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 blah. Studying doesn't help you get to that GMAT score. It's precision. It's achieving that excellence that helps you get to that GMAT score. And depending on that study point, depending on where you study, where you start from, the amount of time required to reach excellence is going to be different. Okay. And the same thing, let's kind of look at Abby over here. Look at the amount of time she's spending on quant versus Chase. She's spending twice as much time as Chase is on quant. Now, even when she's spending twice as much time, she is not achieving the same level of excellence as Chase is. Why? Because she doesn't need to. Her verbal is compensating for that. And making those decisions even before you start studying uh, is really important. Why? Because it tells you what you're aiming for. It tells you where you're going to achieve excellence. It tells you what you're not going to do. And on having a good understanding of each of these three things is really important. Now let's kind of look at even more. So now we've just talked about the time, but when you think about where they're going to put their focus on, it's going to be even more surprising for you. So the biggest difference is not the amount of time they study on quant and verbal, but where they spend their time and kind of focus over here. So remember the percentiles that they're aiming for. Let's kind of look at the percentiles over here. Let's go back. This is where Chase is this is what Chase is aiming for on the right hand side. You can see his percentiles. Abby was aiming for higher percentiles on verbal and lower percentiles in quant. So let's go over here. Now, what you see on this chart is how your percentiles improves as uh, uh, as you actually go through what we call as stages of learning. So I want to give you guys some time to read this chart over here. So what happens is if you just learn the concepts, if you read books, just learn the concepts, you get to that 25th percentile. Once you learn application, you get to that 50th, 55th percentile. When you master application, you start to get to that 70th percentile. When you refine to perfection, you start to get to that 90th percentile, and then you have to maintain that performance and achieve that test readiness. And just remember this chart over here. Why? Because what this chart tells you is that your percentile score is an outcome of you having achieved something. And this is something that we have learned from our research of upwards of 40,000 students. Uh, and we track close to 600 points per student. So it's upwards of 2.5 million points that we've done. Okay. So when you think about Abby, and you have to say, where does Abby spend her time? You can really see her starting percentiles over here. Abby starts at a 59 percentile in SC. So where should she be spending her time? What do you think? Where do you think Abby should be spending her time when it comes to sentence correction? Based on the principle that you saw earlier. Good. Mastering. So Abby is going to primarily spend her time on mastering application and refining to perfection. She already knows the concepts. She doesn't need to learn the concepts. Okay. Similarly in critical reasoning, similarly in reading comprehension, those 6 weeks that she had spent decided on verbal were 2 weeks each on SC, CR, and RC. A bulk of those 2 weeks are going to be spent over here. When it comes to arithmetic and algebra, she's not aiming for super high percentiles. So she's aiming for percentiles which are lower than 70. So she's going to spend a ton of time on learning concepts and mastering application. She's not going to worry about solving super hard questions because that's not her goal. Her goal is to do that on the verbal side of things. Okay. Now, where Abby spends time, does this seem logical? Again, this gets her to that 740 score. Why does this not seem logical? if I'm already at 60th percentile, I know how to apply this. Otherwise, you won't get to that 60th percentile. That's the definition of percentile. You need to master application. You need to figure out those kinks and refine to perfection. If you're starting at a 42nd percentile in arithmetic and algebra, you've got to learn concepts and applications. You've got to then master application. Why is that not logical? Okay, let's look at what Chase would do. Chase's journey is going to be very different. Okay, so Chase starting at 34th percentile in SCU, where should he be spending his time? In sentence correction. No, where? Learning concepts, yes. Learning concepts and application. Okay, he needs to spend. The reason he needed 9 weeks on verbal is because he needed to do this additional step. Okay. On the quant side of things, where should he be spending time? He already is at 72nd percent. Refined to perfection, yes. Where he should be spending, he's already at 72nd percentile. He needs to be spending time on refined to perfection and maintaining. I mean, does Chase need to learn any concepts in arithmetic and algebra? Most likely not. He's already at a Q49. Again, very different places. What happens to Chase and Abby if they blindly solve questions from the OG? The question is, what happens to Chase and Abby if they blindly solve questions from the official guide or from another forum? What happens to their study plan? What happens to their improvement? They're not going to improve. Why? Because to get to improve, you're going to lose track of time. That's there. But the biggest reason is you're not going to attack the right items. You're not going to go about this in the methodical manner. You're going to see some improvement, but nearly not as efficiently as what you're going to see if you are methodical. But the key takeaway from this is that even though both Chase and Abby are aiming for a 740, their path, the amount of time required, and the components of the e-GMAT course that they're going to use if they're e-GMAT students, they're very different. One of the most common questions that I ask is that I get from my students is, how much time will I need to complete the course? And my response, which is surprising to many students because you don't get such a response from other test prep companies, is why do you need to complete the course? Your goal is to get to a certain GMAT score. Let's figure out what portions of course you need to do so that you get to that GMAT score. You don't need to complete the course. Our courses are built for students who start at 10 percentile or who start at 80th percentile. But each one of them is going to go through a different journey. And that's important. So with that, let's kind of look at how do you build ability. Okay. And again, this part is the only part that's specific to e-GMAT course. But if you're using something else, and if that another method of preparation and that method of preparation gives you that modularity, the principles would still apply to you. But essentially, what have we learned so far? We've learned that when it comes to securing admission to top business schools, you need to get that score of 730. Your GMAT's a test of ability, and again, to get to those scores, you need to build ability. You need that personalized study plan to achieve your target score in an efficient manner. And to do that, you need to define which stage of learning you're going to start from, which stage of and how you're going to proceed from that stage, and a good estimate of the amount of time that you need. And there are 4 stages of learning and 1 stage of retention. You learn concepts, you learn application. So we kind of club learning concepts and application in stage 1, but in the e-GMAT course, we actually even divide them separately. Then you master application, refine to perfection, and then you maintain performance. Okay. So once again, that chart that we had, remember the percentile scores that you really see. In fact, if you want to see how many of our successful students have navigated through these stages, what are the data points, because we track your performance every 30 minutes. We have videos on our YouTube channel that outline how their course attempts were, what data did they receive every 30 minutes, what feedback did they receive, and how they reacted to that feedback. And as you go through it, you're going to see it's a very logical progression as you go through these stages of learning. It's not about blindly studying content and really hoping you're going to get to that score. It's a very scientific approach to achieving that percentile ability. Let me ask this other question. How many of you in any subsection, or even on quant or verbal, are stuck at that 60th percentile and feel, man, I got to that 60th percentile or 50th percentile, I'm not able to improve beyond that? Let me remove broadcast results so that your responses are not colored or impacted by. 3, 2. Let's get a few more responses, guys. The question is, how many of you are stuck at 60th percentile in any subsection, whether it's SCCR, RC, arithmetic, algebra, or if you want to just elaborate it even more, number properties, critical reasoning, word problem, number properties, algebra, word problems, geometry, or PNC probability, etc. So but 92% of you are stuck over there. So it's just to really give you some numbers. People who are stuck at 60th percentile, they're 80,000 people ahead of you. At that 90th percentile, there are about 20,000 people who are ahead of you. Now, typically they spend the same amount of time learning. It's not that they just one spends more or the other. Their starting abilities is very similar, and it's one of the things that a lot of people really think about when it comes to students is they say, hey, this guy got a higher GMAT score because he's smarter. No, in our experience, that doesn't happen. In fact, we wrote an article last on the 10th of October. It's an article in which we researched about 600 students, and the title of the article is "What Causes Success on the GMAT?" And that article received 5,000 views, and in that's what we concluded. People who get stuck at a 650 score are just as smart as those who achieve a 730 or higher. It's about how they approach their GMAT preparation. And the thing that you have to understand is that 90th percentile is about achieving perfection, and perfection comes with attitude. And I want you to kind of take this one word away, regardless of how you're studying, is perfection. Why? Because when you spend that next 30 minutes, next 1 hour, ask yourself, how are you going to achieve perfection? So here's how a 60th percentile versus a 90th percentile student thinks about preparing. And we're going to focus just on sentence correction, because what Payal is going to do is in about 5 minutes, she's going to solve a question, and she's going to look at how do you solve a question, how do you review such that you achieve perfection. Okay, the guy who scores 60th percentile thinks of GMAT sentence correction as something that's composed of these 8 major error types overall. The 90th percentile student thinks of it very differently. When it comes to how to solve, or what we call as application, um, a 60th percentile student uses splits as the primary technique. And there is this notion which says that, hey, as the questions get more difficult, I'm going to use meaning. Doesn't work that way. You can't determine which question is difficult. And if you have to make that decision on the test, you're going to find it very hard. Okay. Um, when they're studying sentence correction, they give themselves, they take about 7 to 10 feedback points and to really tell them whether they're actually achieving that excellence or perfection in sentence correction. And in terms of how the amount of time spent between learning and practice, they spend about 30% of their time learning content or learning concepts and methods, and 70% of their time practicing. Anyone who's been doing studying for sentence correction experience this, where you've spent some time studying and you've been practicing for a very long time and still you're stuck at that 60th percentile over here. 30% learning, 70% practice. Okay. People who achieve 90th percentile, who achieve in that 90th percentile properly, study very differently. It's the same 40 hours, okay, but they study very differently. They think of GMAT sentence correction as to learn about 200 major error types in these categories. The categories are the same, the granularity is a lot more. They really say, hey, I'm going to solve every question using meaning. Meaning is a method for them, it's not an error type. For the other group, meaning was an error type. They use the meaning-based approach to solve questions that tested meaning, whereas the 90th percentile guy says everything is meaning. And you're going to see this if you read debriefs on GMAT, share GMAT experience. You're going to find that people who hit that 90th percentile talk about meaning. By the way, if you go to GMAT Club Share GMAT Experience Forum, do you know how many debriefs in October were written by e-GMAT students? Or what percentage of debriefs in October were written by e-GMATers? What percentage can you guess? No one's willing to take a guess. About 60% of all debriefs on GMAT Clubs Share GMAT Experience were by e-GMATers. The funny thing is, the other 40% also talk about the same methods that we talk about. Okay. The number of feedback points that they get during learning, just in sentence correction, is between 80 to 120 points. And again, look at the biggest things, the time spent between learning and practice. They spend 60% of their time learning concepts and methods. And they get feedback. They solve questions while doing that, but that's very targeted. And beyond that, they only spend 40% of their time practicing. Okay. The key thing to ask yourself is, if GMAT sentence correction in many ways tests about 200 concepts, how can you achieve perfection if you only get feedback 7 to 10 times? And what does that feedback tell you with regards to whether you're learning in the right manner or not? And when you do learn to apply these concepts, when do you learn to do that? After you've learned a ton of these concepts, or while you're learning concepts? Andrea says, what is a feedback point? That's a great question, Andrea. Pyle is going to elaborate on this. But let's say you learn present tenses. You read a book. You actually went through it and you understood what present tenses were. How would you tell yourself that okay, among all the GMAT test takers, I've learned it enough that I can be in the top 10 percentile of students? Or when you've learned verb ed modifiers, how would you tell yourself that I've learned well enough to be considered in the top 10 percentile of students? That's a feedback point. Verb ing modifiers. Does that help? Because again, it's about achieving perfection. You're trying to be better than others. You're not just trying to learn things, because learning things doesn't help you. Being better than others helps you. So if you're an e-GMAT student in just the sentence correction course, where do you get those feedback points? When you're learning concepts, you get 75 personalized feedback points. Each of these feedback points is composed of at least 7 evaluation items. At least 7. So you're looking at 75 times 7 evaluation items. When you're learning application, you get 23 personalized
Right.
feedback.
Thank you, Rajat, and welcome everyone. I see there are a few questions about the personalized feedback points. I will definitely address that. I'm going to show you how do you get the feedback from that Rajat has been talking about. All right, so let's talk about the methods. What do you need to do? So far we have understood that it's very important to gain that mastery of application so that you're able to build your ability to solve difficult questions correctly, because that's what your goal is. That's what is going to get you to that 90th percentile in each of the subsections in GMAT Quant, in GMAT verbal and quant. So let's talk about the method part. Okay, what is it that you need to do in order to achieve the mastery of application? The first and the foremost thing is you need to learn, and I'm going to read this verbatim because it's that very important. You need to learn the step-by-step method that you need to use consistently to solve each and every question in that particular section. That method has to be consistently applied, and there is only one method that you need to use in order to solve any question from that subsection. Okay, that's the first and the foremost thing. How many of you today utilize multiple methods to solve a question based on what the question is? Let's say you're solving sentence correction. We'll talk about sentence correction right now. Let's say how many of you use different strategies to solve, let's say, partially underlined sentence, completely underlined sentence, a sentence that begins with certain things or whatnot. And that's where the problem is. Half of the class uses multiple methods, and that is why you end up actually wasting your time figuring out what method to use based on the question that has been posed, versus if you learn a consistent step-by-step method to solve any kind of sentence correction question, that is what is going to get you to that 90th percentile. So that's the first and the foremost thing that we're going to do. The second thing that you need to do is you need to, in order to gain that mastery of method, because method doesn't come easy. I mean, this method needs to become intuitive to you. Okay. Initially, when you start learning, start applying the method, and I am going to demonstrate that method to you. Initially, when you start applying that method, you feel, oh my goodness, it's so laborious. But ultimately, in order for you to gain that mastery, what you need are detailed solutions. Each and every solution that you experience, that you review, that you spend your worthy time on, needs to be established on that method so that you learn, and learn is in caps and underlined because that's so much important it is, so that you learn from each and every question that you attempt. When you're practicing questions, you're not just solving hundreds or thousands of questions. When you're practicing, your goal is to learn from each and every question that you are solving. And that learning comes from the detailed solutions that are based on that one method that you need to use to solve any question in that particular subsection. Okay. Now, this is again feedback comes from, and I'm going to demonstrate the feedback to you. So please withhold your questions with regards to what is this feedback. I'm going to demonstrate where you get the feedback, how do you utilize that feedback. But this is the third thing over here, that as you are in order to master the method, you need to get feedback so that you know, okay, what type of questions do you need to focus on? Okay, do you need to focus your energy more on, let's say, modifiers type questions because you're taking longer to solve those questions, or is your accuracy on difficult verb questions really poor, so you need to work on your methods on verbs related questions? So that kind of feedback tells you where you need to focus your energy on, because as we've talked about, you have finite amount of time and you have that target score of 90th percentile in sentence correction that you need to meet. For that, you need to know where you spend your effort. Okay, so that is what we're going to talk about. That is how you achieve mastery. First of all, you know that you need to, you realize, first of all, that realization is very important, that you need to utilize just one method, okay, one method, not multiple strategies, a single method, okay. Secondly, you need to understand how do you master this method, and for that, you absolutely need detailed solutions that are based on that one method, okay. And then you need to get the feedback so that you know where to focus your energy on. Okay, so let's explore the method that I've been talking about till now. We'll take up a sentence correction question for demonstration purposes. So today, what method do you utilize today to solve sentence correction question, and be as detailed as possible? You can also go into the details of first I do this, then I do that, then I do that, because that's when I absolutely understand what kind of method or process are you using today to solve a sentence correction question. So let's get your responses here. Okay, let's get a few more responses. Okay, I'm going to read a few. Okay, read the question, understand the meaning and errors, look for errors in the answer choices, choose the correct one. Okay, that's a good one. Understand the meaning and errors. Meaning, then finding errors and checking for errors. Good. Read answers to see what comes off. Okay, so you are focusing more on the answer choices. Then read common errors, elimination, meaning. Okay, so again, you utilizing meaning as an error type. You're first eliminating grammar errors and choices based on grammatical errors, then you're focusing on meaning. Meaning-based approach that I learned with e-GMAT, very good. Elimination first, grammar based, then meaning, then finally avoidables. Okay, so I see a mixed bag over here, which is good. There are some of you who are utilizing the meaning-based approach in the true sense of what it is intended to be when we coined this approach about 9 years back. So that is good to know. Some of you are utilizing meaning-based approach a little loosely. I mean, you're utilizing meaning as a grammar, as an error type, as Rajat alluded to earlier. So we'll see as to how you do on this question and what kind of changes would you want to do in your approach. So let's talk about the question first. Now, I'm going to show you this question, and I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes, okay? And I want you to solve this question using the method that you typically use. I don't want you to change anything at this point in time, okay? So I'm going to get you the question, but as I do that, I also want you to click on, okay, let's get the question here. Okay. Here you go. So I'm gonna, yeah, you guys can, let me show you the question here. Here you go. 1.5 minutes. All right, last few seconds. 90 seconds is already up, but I don't see very many responses. So I'm going to give you another 30 seconds. All right, I've given you upwards of 2.5 minutes now. So I'm going to I'm going to end the poll now. About how many people have answered this question? Yeah. So, all right. So majority of you, or 44% of the class, has selected choice C, and then I have choice D as the next contender and choice E as the second contender here, third contender here. Okay, now tell me one thing. If you answer this question incorrectly, if let's say when you're solving this question on your own and you realize that, okay, you didn't solve this question correctly, how would you log this in your error log? Or yeah, first of all, just looking at the question and knowing that you answered it incorrectly, what would your error log entry look like? Type in the open-ended question. I just want to understand how is it that you are, first of all, solving the questions, the method, we'll talk about that. And then what feedback are you getting from this question when you're solving such a question on your own? I'll give you a hint. If let's say just based on the question you don't know what error log entry you're going to make, you can pose a question. What is it that you're looking for to make your error log entry? Okay. I read solution to understand error types I missed to find the patterns of missing knowledge. Okay. Difficulty, medium, good. Okay, medium. Modifier structure, that's the error log entry. Okay, good. Unable to eliminate based on common errors. Good. If it is specific kind of error that is missed, like subjunctive verb, then you'll put in that error type. Okay. All right, good. I am glad to see that. That is good. Very important. Okay, next what I'm going to now ask is, what is the method that you used to solve this question? I know I'm asking you lots of questions. I promise I'm going to give you the detailed solution for this question. Don't worry about that. But let me first understand, what is the method that you used to solve this question? Elimination based on what? Elimination based on what? Were you able to identify splits? Let me ask you that. Were you able to identify any splits in this question? Intuition and usage with my experience, okay. Contrast, meaning is changed, okay. Understood the meaning, no. Okay, so how many of you tried to solve this question first by a splits approach? How many of you tried to solve this question first by identifying splits? Okay, 4 of you. Okay, quite a few of you. Were you able to identify any splits, or were you able to identify splits first of all? And I'll show you the question here. Were you able to identify splits? Now, there are definitely splits in this. If you're looking for similarities and dissimilarities in the answer choices, there definitely exist similarities and dissimilarities. But the problem is, and I try to use that over here, right? But the problem is, and let me ask you this question: how many of you knew what split is correct and what split is not correct? Was that easy? Yes or no? No. So essentially, the go-to method that students typically use, that is to identify, look at the answer choices, identify what are the similarities, what are the dissimilarities, right? You may call that anything. You may call that splits method, you may call that, answer choice analysis and whatnot, or elimination based on grammar rules. You always start that by first identifying what is similar and what is not similar in the answer choices. But then, in difficult questions, it becomes really difficult to identify how do I figure out which part of the split is actually correct so that I can eliminate answer choices. Is that what happened here? Yes or no? It became really difficult to identify what is actually correct and what is not correct. Right? And for you to identify what is correct, really you had to look into, you had to understand the meaning, right? How many of you had to really understand the meaning? You had to resort to going to the sentence to understand its meaning. Everybody, right? Because there is no other way to solve this question. Now, you may say that, okay, Payal, you chose this question. This is a difficult question. Just to prove your point that meaning is important, you chose this question. Believe me, every difficult question that appears on the test can be solved consistently by applying the meaning-based approach. If you right off the bat, if your first step is to understand the meaning of the sentence and then do any of your other grammatical and answer choice analysis, you have a sure shot way of solving that question correctly. You have a sure shot way of not wasting your time. Okay, and that is the point that I want to drive home. I really feel bad when students say, okay, my first step is to look for similarities, or my first step is to eliminate answer choices based on grammar and then look at the meaning. That's when I say, okay, you're doing it backwards. Okay, why not just first understand the meaning? Why are you wasting your time? Why are you losing that opportunity to solve this question correctly? But if you focus on the meaning as the first step, on all questions, not just difficult questions, on all questions, if that process becomes second nature to you, intuitive to you, that's when you are going to be on the path of that 90th percentile ability in sentence correction. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay. So as I said, you cannot use similarities and dissimilarities to consistently solve SC questions correctly. Again, I'm talking about difficult questions. If you want to solve easy questions, absolutely. Splits work absolutely fine. But you don't know what question is difficult. You don't know what question is easy. Right? You don't know that. And plus, your goal is to get to those difficult questions correctly. And if you're aiming for that, then you need to start utilizing this method consistently on every sentence correction question. Only then you can build your ability. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I would solve this question. Okay. And I'm going to be asking you certain questions as I'm doing this. But first and foremost, the first thing with any sentence is that I need to read the sentence by strategically pausing at appropriate points so that I understand the meaning completely. I don't just want a gist of the meaning. I don't just want gist of the sentence. I want to know what each and every aspect in the sentence means. And for that, I need to read the sentence slowly. Okay, I know pausing, slowly are not the terms that you want to hear in the context of the GMAT, given that GMAT is a timed test. But if you don't pause, if you don't read the sentence slowly, then you will not be able to understand the meaning in the manner that I want you to understand the meaning. Is this point clear, yes or no? Good. So here is how I'm going to read the sentence slowly to understand its meaning. The church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day. And then I see this word with over here. So I just pause over here because I know if there is a word with, it's going to give me some more information about it. So first I just read this. The church coined this particular date, Feb 14th, as Valentine's Day. I know that the church has termed 14th February as Valentine's Day. with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia. So who has the motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia? Till this point, what is it that you've understood about so who has this ulterior motive? The church, absolutely. Now, I paused here, right? I paused here. Why did I pause here? Because I wanted to answer this question. As I'm pausing, I'm actually answering the question. Okay, I'm asking the question and then I'm answering it based on the information that I've just read. So whose ulterior motive it was to Christianize the pagan celebration? It was the church's ulterior motive. And I'm going to write that in my notes. Church's motive to Christianize pagan celebration. Okay, is claimed by a few experts. Now this is where I just pause and I think, okay, what is claimed by a few experts? So what would your answer be when I ask you the question, what is claimed by a few experts? What is claimed by a few experts? Not just the motive, the entire thing. Absolutely, it's the entire thing that the church coined Feb 14th as Valentine's Day with this ulterior motive. That is what is claimed by a few experts. Absolutely, church coining the date with the ulterior motive. How many of you questioned that when you were reading the sentence? Or how many of you tried to understand that when you were reading the sentence? Okay, so that is the level of understanding that needs to happen as you are reading the sentence. Okay, for those of you who are not doing that, I want you to start doing it. Okay, so let's read further. But it is celebrated on this date. Now, but definitely identifies a contrast, right? All of us understand that. There is a contrast in this sentence. But it is celebrated. What is celebrated? What is celebrated? What does it refer to over here? As I'm reading the meaning, as I'm reading the sentence for its meaning, I'm obviously questioning the grammar aspect of it as well. Okay, it is a pronoun. What does it refer to? What is celebrated in order for me to understand the meaning? But it is celebrated. Valentine's Day is celebrated, not the pagan celebration. The Valentine's Day is celebrated on this date on Feb 14th. What does this date refer to? Feb 14th. But Valentine's Day is celebrated on this date to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial, okay, is the more prevalent belief. Okay, so really the contrast is that there are two. Okay, so essentially what this says is that the more prevalent belief is what? That Valentine's Day is celebrated on Feb 14th to honor the anniversary of Saint Valentine's death or burial. Okay, now overall, so I've read the sentence. When I was reading the sentence, I was pausing at appropriate pause points, trying to understand the meaning of the chunks, and I was trying to relate the meaning back over here. But it is celebrated. I related that back to, okay, what are we talking about? Whose celebration are we talking about? We're talking about Valentine's Day celebration, right? So I'm questioning myself over there. I'm trying to be very, very active as I'm reading the sentence so that I get every aspect of the sentence in my mind. Okay. Then I understand it from an overall perspective, and what I understand is that there are two claims about the celebration of Feb 14th as Valentine's Day. Okay, the first claim is that the church designated it with an ulterior motive, and the second claim is that it is really celebrated on this date to honor the anniversary of the Saint Valentine. And the first claim is by a few experts. The second claim is the more prevalent belief. Okay, how many of you had this level of clarity when you read the sentence on your own? Okay, half of the class did and the other half didn't. Okay, now I'm going to pose a question here. These are the three aspects that we got, right? And I want you to tell me what all aspects were you able to identify. Okay, let me get the poll here. So, mark the ones that you could not identify when you read the sentence on your own. So 1, 2, 3. We change the poll, question type, multiple answers. Yeah, all right. So mark the ones that you could not identify when you read the sentence on your own. Okay. Let's get a few more responses. Majority of you could not identify claim number 3. Quite a few of you were not able to identify claim number 2, claim number 1. The part aspect 1, that there are 2 claims about celebrating Feb 14th as Valentine's Day. Okay, and I can absolutely see, because you were not able to identify this aspect, that claim 1 is by a few experts and claim 2 is the more prevalent belief. That's the reason majority of you, or 44% of the class, selected choice C, and I'm going to talk about why that is the case. Okay. All right. Any thoughts right now? We've gone through the meaning. Any thoughts right now? So essentially, if you could understand all the aspects of the meaning, okay, when you read the sentence on your own, then you can understand the meaning of the sentence well enough. So good job. Okay. If you were able to understand only 1 or 2 or 0, if you were not able to understand all the 3 aspects of the meaning, then you need to first build your skill set in understanding the meaning of the sentence. Okay. How many of you were not able to understand all the 3 aspects? Answer choice C is wrong, and I'm going to explain to you why. For those of you who were not able to understand all the 3 aspects, my feedback to you is focus on Master Comprehension course. Okay, that is the course which is going to tell you how is it that you read the sentence to understand the meaning 100%. Okay, right? So for you to understand the meaning 100%, you have to master the skill. There is no other way. You have to master the skill. You need to master the skill of reading the sentence by strategically pausing, and that's the skill that e-GMAT students learn through Master Comprehension course, and they continue to build that skill as they are going through each and every solution in the course. Okay, so I know you guys are curious about why C is wrong. First, let's talk about what are the errors in choice A. Okay, essentially, if you think about it, the sentence was not written in a very lucid manner, because we really had to struggle over here. Remember when I asked you what is claimed by a few experts, I really had to focus on that, because the sentence didn't really give that to me explicitly, because the author didn't write the sentence in the right manner, right? So essentially, is claimed and is the more prevalent belief. The sentence doesn't really give us what is claimed and what is the more prevalent belief. We have to infer that information from this sentence, and that's why this sentence is not correct. The highlighted verbs do not have associated subjects. Okay, how many of you identified this error? Quite a few of you identified this error. That's good. Okay, now let's move on to our answer choices now. So now what I'm going to do is, with this meaning analysis and error analysis, now I'm going to analyze each and every answer choice, and I'm going to also share with you so there were a total of 3 people who selected choice B. So see, now when I'm evaluating each answer choice, I am absolutely keeping all the 3 aspects of the meaning in front of me, along with my list of typical errors, which are subject, verb, pronoun, modifiers, parallelism. So those 7 error types will always be in my mind, or as a checklist on my scratch paper. Along with that, I will have my meaning-based aspects that the sentence tells me also written down. Okay, so that I know what all criteria my correct answer choice needs to meet. Okay, so let's carry forward with it. While with an ulterior motive, so while means there is a contrast, which is good. With an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration, a few experts do claim. Now, according to this sentence, according to this choice, a few experts present their claim behind the celebration with an ulterior motive. So this ulterior motive is now linked with the few experts, which is absolutely wrong. The ulterior motive was really church's ulterior motive. That is what we figured out from the meaning of the sentence. So that's why choice B is wrong. Okay. So again, the other thing is that these experts claim that church coined Feb 14th as Valentine's Day. This does not capture the reason as stated in claim 1, the specific motive. The motive doesn't come over here. That is why this choice is wrong. Okay. So the same thing written in two different ways. The with an ulterior motive is to be associated with the church, but in this choice, this has been associated with a few experts, and that is why it is wrong. Okay. Now I have a question. Would you write the meaning analysis during the test or do that in your mind? It all depends. Because, and initially you may want to write down the meaning analysis in your scratch pad as you're learning the process. But when the process becomes intuitive in your mind, you will recognize you don't even need to write that down. Because automatically you would know, you would have understood the meaning so well that you would know, oh, the original sentence talked about church's ulterior motive. This sentence is talking about few experts' ulterior motive. That doesn't make sense, right? So you would automatically start to do that as you build your ability in applying the process, okay? But initially, definitely write down stuff. Let's look at choice C, which is really an interesting choice, which was selected by quite a few of you, and let me show you that. So about 16 of you selected choice C, 44% of all of those who answered the question. While a few experts claim that the church coined this date with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration, their more prevalent belief is that, and this is where this thing is wrong, claim 2 is not by these few experts. Now this choice, by utilizing the pronoun there, now implies that these experts, their more prevalent belief is that this is celebrated on to honor the anniversary, and that is what is wrong. So for those of you, and majority of choice C was the most popular choice. Here the problem really is that this aspect number 3, was not expressed correctly, which is why when I said majority of you, 70% of you could not identify aspect number 3, that is why you guys selected choice C. Okay, 13 of you could not identify aspect number 3, 16 of you selected choice C. And that really goes to say stuff, right? If you don't focus on, for difficult questions, okay, if you don't focus on these, on understanding the meaning 100%, you are going to fall in these traps, okay? There's nothing grammatically wrong in this choice. Grammatically, it's absolutely fine. Were you able to identify, and that's why so many of you selected this choice. What level of question this is? This is a 700 plus level question. But now, remember when I asked you, if you answer this question incorrectly, what is it that what error log entry are you going to make for this question? Now tell me, if you answer this question incorrectly, now that you know choice C is wrong, okay, what is it that you're going to enter in your error log? Why did you make that mistake? And that's very important, because again, you have to learn from each and every question that you answer. Okay, you need to focus on meaning. How would you even identify that you need to focus on meaning? Focus on meaning when? That's another question to answer, right? Currently, many of you consider meaning as one of the error types. That needs to change. You need to bring meaning up front. Meaning has to be front and center. These 3 aspects need to be figured out before you even look at any of the answer choices. Okay, because if you don't do that, you end up selecting choices such as choice C, which are grammatically beautifully written. Okay, you end up selecting such choices as correct answers. Or In certain choices that what I've observed is there may be a very minor error which you will struggle to identify, but if you focus on meaning, you will know exactly why that choice is wrong. And that is why you need to bring meaning up front. Okay, so your error log entry, and we'll talk about that aspect as well, should be related to, I didn't do meaning analysis properly. I need to pause a little bit more. I need to relate certain aspects a bit more. Okay, now let's take a look at choice D. Okay, all right. Choice D. The church coined the date Feb 14th as Valentine's Day, as claimed by a few experts. Okay. Now, it's not very clear over here what does as claimed by a few experts modify. Okay, as I've written down over here, does it modify the action of coining that date as Valentine's Day, or does it modify the ulterior motive? What is claimed by a few experts is something which is not very clear. Okay. The other thing is the more prevalent belief. What does that link to? But its celebration on this date is to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. The more prevalent belief, what does that link to? It's not very clearly linked with anything in the sentence, and that is why this choice is wrong. Okay. So choice D is wrong. Now let's take a look at choice E. Tell me, why did you reject choice E? Choice E didn't get much love. Why is that? What was wrong? What turned out to be wrong? Choice E is actually correct, but why did you feel choice E is wrong? Did you feel that the sentence structure is a little weird? How many of you felt, yeah, it started with that? Right? That's why you felt that it's a weird sentence structure. See, there's nothing wrong when starting a sentence with that. And that's why you have to go by, is this sentence, is that a deterministic error? Is there a grammar rule that says that a sentence cannot start with that? Yes or no? Have you ever read a grammar rule that a sentence should not start with that, a sentence should not start with because? I know sentence should not start with because is not a grammar rule, but it's considered to be it's considered to be an error by quite a few students, but there's no grammatical basis for it. Okay, so again, don't go by what you feel is not correct. Okay, and that's where, because people don't focus on meaning, that's why they end up relying on what sounds right, what sounds a little weird. That's why they end up relying on that. Okay, it is not a common practice to use that. I mean, this sentence has a different sentence structure, but different doesn't mean incorrect. It has an uncommon sentence structure, but that doesn't mean that it's incorrect. Okay, now just an offshoot question, can a sentence start with and? Typically not on GMAT, I have not seen that. Okay, but that's not to say, again, and usually connects certain stuff. If there should be an entity before and to connect it with, right? So that's the reason why there is a grammatical basis of not starting a sentence with and. Okay, now you can say, okay, because is a cause and effect, right? As long as you're showing the effect after stating the cause after because, definitely the sentence will be fine. Okay, so again, the key thing being, don't rely on what sounds right. Don't rely on what you generally see as common sentence structures, right? So rely on meaning. If you have meaning on your side, if you get all the aspects of the meaning from the sentence and you keep that along with commonly utilized grammatical errors in the sentences, that's the sure shot way of getting difficult questions correct. Okay. Alright, so I decided on E because I could imagine New York Times writing the sentence and the rest of the options distorted the meaning. Good job, good job. As long as you could identify distortion of meaning in the other choices, that's good. Now again, you bring up a very interesting point. You could imagine New York Times writing the sentence, right? And that is something which you have to expand your, that's a very good point, because you need to be aware of correct sentence structures or various sentence structures that are utilized on the GMAT. And that is why preparing from a credible source is very important. As you solve the questions that are there on the e-GMAT platform, you will see that these questions are based on how GMAT creates questions, that you will be exposed to the various sentence structures that are utilized on the GMAT. Plus, as you solve official questions at the right time, you will be further exposed to what kind of sentence structures GMAT utilizes. Right? So reading New York Times is a very good idea, definitely. Okay. So let's carry forward. So essentially, if you want to score a 90th percentile, you need to be able to solve such questions. And for that, you need to be able to master the method. Okay. Any concerns about the method? First of all, are you guys convinced that meaning-based method is the way to answer questions correctly? Are you guys convinced about that? And not just meaning after you have eliminated the answer choices based on grammatical terms, because for difficult questions you will not be able to do that. Okay, and for you to consistently build your ability to absorb this method, to apply this method, you need to apply this method on all the questions. Okay. Now let's talk about. Okay, so I see an interesting point here. Did all the hard work of understanding the meaning yet got the wrong answer? Now, again, it doesn't come easy. It is not an easy thing to do. Okay, but that's why you have to work on it right from the get-go, and you need to work with the material that helps you build that ability, right? And that's what I'm going to talk about. How is it that you master this method? Okay, so I'm not saying that every successful student answers all the questions correctly right from the get-go. No. Okay, so that's what I'm going to now explain to you. How do you master this method? Okay, but the first and the foremost thing is that belief that this is the method that I need to use in order to get to that 90th percentile. Okay, so now let's get to how do you effectively master. The key thing for mastering this is you need to have detailed solutions that help you master this. Now, what is the role of detailed solution? As I asked you, after you solve a question, right, you need to review its solutions and you need to answer these questions so that you learn from this question. And then you apply these learnings to the next questions that you solve. It's an iterative process. You solve a question, you review the solution, you learn from it, and then you apply those learnings. Okay. And that's what and this review is called as a strategic review, and this review needs to happen from the get-go. The first application file that you see, you need to start utilizing strategic review process on that file all the way through Scholaranium, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that. What is strategic review? The first question that you need to ask is, was I able to understand all the aspects of the meaning? Okay. Yes, you did the meaning analysis. You did the hard work of understanding the meaning. But were you able to understand all the three aspects of the meaning? Okay. Because the solution presents that information to you, you will know, yes, I understood aspect 1. Yes, I understood aspect 2. But I didn't really have that level of clarity with aspect 3. You need to get that answer. Okay. Then why did you reject the correct choice? Here, the answer was relatively straightforward, right? You looked at the answer, the incorrect answer. You have to look at the solution, and then you have to ask yourself, why did I reject the correct choice, right? Oh, I felt that the sentence structure was a little weird. Now you make that note in your error log that, okay, I rejected the correct choice because I felt that that the sentence structure was weird, right? So was it because of some misunderstood grammatical rule? Over here, this was a misunderstood grammatical rule that cannot start a sentence, right? So that's the answer over here. Why did you select the incorrect answer choice? Was it because of any meaning issue that you could not spot? In this case, yes, that was. Or was it because of some misunderstood grammatical rule? So you need to answer these questions. Okay, the answer for each of these questions need to go into your error log. That's when you will be able to see what kind of mistakes are you making? Are your mistakes primarily linked to not understanding all the aspects? Are your mistakes because you are applying some grammatical rule incorrectly? And if yes, what is that grammatical rule? When you do this kind of error log entries, that's when you know that, okay, now you know where to focus on. How many of you create error log entries that are to the depth of this strategic review? See, difficulty level of questions, whether you got the question right or not, whether this question is modifier based or whatnot, all those are very, very high level things. They are very much on the surface. You need to get to the depths of it so that you can identify, okay, what am I not doing right? Okay? You may know all the grammar errors, right? But still you may not understand all the aspects of the meaning because you're not reading it slow enough. You're not doing proper linkages. Then what do? Right now you have to focus on meaning. So next you take 10 questions at 10 complete sentences. You only focus on the meaning aspect of it. That's how you build your ability. Okay? So now, how will we do strategic review of this attempt of this SC question? Why did you reject the correct answer? Okay, it was really the unfamiliar sentence structure. It was the misconception that always has to be used when it is that. Okay, the other one is, but the more prevalent belief is that it is. So I saw one of you also say it is wrong. So that actually leads to this misconception. Okay, you did this wrong because you had this misconception that you always have to use that. So it could be any one of those two reasons, right? So you need to figure that out on your own. Okay. Now, why did you select the incorrect choice as the correct answer? Okay, very important to do. So for each of these over here, again, choice A, failed to observe the sentence structure issue. You couldn't notice grammatical error here. Over here, failed to observe meaning distortion, right? Over here, because we are talking about a few experts having the ulterior motive, and that's wrong. Okay. Over here again, fail to observe the meaning distortion. That few experts, the claim is by both the claims are by these few experts. And over here again, meaning distortion plus the sentence structure as well. Okay. Now, when you do this level of analysis, okay, that's when your error log becomes meaningful. Okay, and if you have, and you can do this analysis only if you have detailed solutions. Okay, now this question is part of our Scholarinium platform. Okay, and look at the detailed solution over here. We've broken the sentence into its sentence structure so that you know where all to pause. After that, we've shown you, okay, what all meaning aspects you should have identified. Okay, that this is meaning 1. What is claim 1? Claim 1, claim 2. Claim 1 is done by few experts and claim 2 is the more prevalent belief. Okay, so you have all the 3 aspects that we identified earlier. Now when you're reviewing the solution on your own, you will see, oh, I didn't see that few experts made claim 1 and claim 2 is the more prevalent belief. There is no linkage between claim 2 and the few experts. That's when that bell would ring in your head, that bulb would glow in your head, that okay, that's the part that I could not understand, and that's why I marked this question incorrect. I answered this question incorrectly. Does this make sense? Doing this level of strategic review, does this make sense? So I have this comment here, sometimes you don't get the meaning even after reading multiple times. You have to identify that, right? You need to, if that is the case, you need to now do an exercise of just 10 sentences wherein all you're doing is just reading the sentence for its meaning. That's what we do in Master Comprehension course. Okay, that's what you need to do then. So that you build that, now you know what you need to, that's the feedback that you need to get. And how do you get that feedback? When you do this level of strategic review. It is time consuming, absolutely. It is absolutely time consuming, but I'm not asking you to do this on thousands of questions. I'm asking you to do that on a handful of questions. Questions that are specifically put together in the application file. You do this on 100 questions, there is no reason for you to solve even the 101st question. Okay, that's what I mean by quality over quantity. When you keep solving thousands and thousands of questions without doing strategic review, you're actually wasting your time on solving questions because you are not really learning from those questions. Versus you spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes on one question, reviewing that one question so that you extract as much as you can from that question so that now you take that learning, that feedback into the next question that you solve. Okay? Likewise, the error analysis. This is again part of our solution in Scholarinium. And for each answer choice, I know this is not legible here, but for each answer choice, you have detailed description of why the answer choice is wrong. When you have such detailed description, you know exactly why you made the mistake or what is it that you missed. And that all information needs to go in your error log. Okay, after you do your strategic review. Okay, so if you want to take a screenshot of this slide, we will anyway be sharing the PDF with you. You need to start doing that, doing this level of analysis if you want to learn from each and every question as you are solving questions. Okay, and this level of analysis is possible only if your solution is built on the meaning-based approach and is as detailed as the solution that I told you, that I showed you, so that you can do all of this analysis. Okay, so we have learned about the significance of the method. We have learned about how to effectively master the method. Okay, now I'm going to talk about how is it that you get the feedback. Okay, the feedback points that Rajat was talking about earlier. Okay. Okay. Now, why do you need the feedback and how is it that you should react to the feedback? Okay. Let's first understand when is it that, for us to understand the relevance of feedback, let's first understand when is it that you should be learning these methods, right? Now, typically, what all of us understand is that sentence correction has, let's say, about 200 concepts, right? And in terms of the difficulty level of the concepts, subject-verb errors are the easiest of all. Then comes verb, then pronouns, then modifiers, then parallelism, comparison. Idioms I haven't put in over here. Idioms are not that important. Okay, but the size of these ovals represent the number of concepts that exist in each of these categories. Do you agree with the sizing and the difficulty level of the concepts? The manner in which we have arranged it. Is your understanding also the same? Yes or no? Okay. All right, so now most prep courses, first of all, courses don't even teach you application. Not many courses teach you application, okay, the way it's supposed to be taught, utilizing one method. But courses that do teach you application, they teach you application after teaching all the concepts. Okay, so you learn all the concepts. You go through a book, you learn all the concepts. So what is the method of preparation today that you're using? Typically, students use a book, they learn all the concepts from a book and then they start solving official questions, right? So while they are learning the concepts, there is no application that is being taught to them. Okay, which is why when you come to solve the questions, you have, when I say questions, I mean SC questions, application on SC questions. So when you come to solve the SC questions, you have all this overload of information and you don't have a consistent process, and that's why you end up faltering, you end up feeling the pain of not being able to solve questions correctly. Okay, that is why what we have done is we have inserted method teaching duo, what we call as application and practice files, at various points as you are learning the concepts. For example, you have two files here with subject verb, you have two files here in verbs, another in pronouns, 3 application practice duo in modifiers, 2 in parallelism, 2 in comparison. Okay. Now when you do this, these are the number of files that exist, okay, which are purely for teaching you the application of the method. Now these questions over here, they are purpose built to include only subject verb errors and not any other errors. Okay. Likewise, the questions that you see in the application files in the verb section, these questions only contain questions that test you on subject, verb and verbs, but a full question, full SC question. Why is that important? It's important because you need to learn. We are teaching you just the method is difficult to learn, but you have to, that's why we have made it easy for you by introducing these purpose-built questions at the right time so that you learn the method on after you've learned the concepts right there and then. Okay, if at this stage you simply go and solve official questions, you will be at a loss, because official questions are not just subject verb questions. Official questions are not just verb questions. They have multiple errors in them. That is why students find it very difficult as they're learning the concepts to start solving questions. And that is why the application files and the practice file duos that we have in the e-GMAT course serve the purpose of teaching you the method at the right time with the right content. Okay. Now, as you learn the method through this, what happens is your ability to solve the questions improves. Okay. Your ability goes from, and I'm going to draw this over here, your ability starts to improve like this. And at the end, by the time you finish the course, you reach to about 70th percentile ability. Does this make sense? Initially, you will take longer to answer the question as well, because you're still learning the process. But as you reach modifiers, that's when, things start to, the method starts to embed, because you've already solved what 1, 2, 5, 6, 7 times 5, at least 35 questions with this process. And you've learned the concepts, and as you go further, your ability continues to improve. So you're building your ability as you're learning the concepts. Okay. Now the next thing over here, as you learn the methods, you utilizing the application files, you also need to figure out, are you learning all these steps properly, or are you struggling with some aspects of the method? And that's where the feedback comes into picture. Okay, as you're learning the method, you basically get feedback on your application files and your practice files, so that you take the corrective actions right there and then, not later on. If you answer one question incorrectly in an application file, that is not just one of the 5 questions incorrectly. That if you answer that one question incorrectly, you have to take that to heart. You have to understand, why did I falter here? It's not just one question. It's that one very important question that you should have answered correctly. You need to take that corrective action right there and then. You need to do that strategic review right there and then. Okay. And just while learning the SC method, student gets feedback 23 times. Okay, I'm just talking about the method learning. Concept learning is a different thing. You get feedback about 67 times when you're learning the concepts. Okay, likewise, such application related feedback in CR, you get 39 times. And again, it's obvious, because CR is a lot, CR, you don't have that many concepts, you have more of application. SC is concepts and application both. Okay. Now, what I'm going to show you is, how is it that students embrace this feedback? How is it that students take feedback and implement corrective actions? Okay. Okay. Sahil scored V38, ended up getting a 730. Okay. Now, this is what his dashboard looks like for subject verb. Look at the subject verb. First of all, I just want, for those of you who are not familiar with this dashboard, these are concept files wherein we are teaching you just very, very modular concepts in a very modular manner. A green number. Okay, subject verb makes sense. For each of these concepts, you're getting a score. Now, in this case, Sahil didn't do very well in subject verb makes sense. Okay, so this is the feedback that he got, that, okay, he needs to work a little harder on this. Okay. Then in the next one, he was okay. Like over here also, he was okay. Ultimately, in subject verb concept practice, which is testing all of these concepts, he scored a decent score over here. Okay. Now, when it comes to application, this is the application practice duo that I was talking about. Application file, he scored poorly, 60%. Now look at this. These are 5 questions, and he spent upwards of 45 minutes on these 5 questions, about 10 minutes per question. Okay. He spent that much amount of time reviewing the answers there, reviewing the solutions there, doing a strategic review there. And because this is the corrective action that he's implementing, he got the score, he went back to the file and he did the file again, and he did a detailed strategic review of that file. Because he did that, in the next file, which is really practicing the same approach, he actually was able to score 100%. That is what I mean by implementing the corrective action. This is the feedback that he's getting. The feedback that you're getting is through these scores. The strategic review that you're doing through the solutions that are there in each of these files. Okay, and the improvement that you're seeing is in the practice file. Okay, that's the path that Sahil followed over here. Okay, let's take a look at verbs here. Verb sequencing, he got 83% here. Okay, but this wasn't in his first attempt, this was in his second attempt. Overall he spent more than an hour on this 10-minute long file. Okay, and he did 2 attempts on this. In the first attempt, he had actually scored a 60%. He took that feedback, he attempted this file again, and now he ended up scoring an 83%. Okay, he spent so much time on just solving these 5 questions correctly. Okay, he did a strategic review over here. Okay, that's the kind of corrective action that I'm talking about. That's the kind of feedback that I'm talking about. The system told him that, okay, you're not ready. Okay, and again, 60%, some of you may think, okay, so what? I got a 60%. In the next file, I'm going to do better. That is the approach that I want you guys to change. 60%, don't settle in for 60%. You need to get that 100% score over here. And if you're not getting that score, spend that time. Review your dashboard. Okay, review your concept file to make sure that you're learning everything from that file. Okay, now verbs application, 80%. Okay, 80%, but look at the amount of time that he spent. He really made sure that he's understanding everything. Okay, and again, verbs practice quiz, he got a 64%, but he went back and reviewed each and everything. Over here in verbs practice quiz, he knew that, okay, he has answered these questions incorrectly, but he went back and he bookmarked these questions. Okay, and he reviewed the solutions for these questions in detail. That is the feedback that I'm talking about. That's the corrective action that I'm talking about. Doing things right there and then, and not saying, oh, it's just one question that I got wrong. Oh, it's a verbs question that I got wrong. Oh, that was a silly mistake. Don't disregard things like that. Because when you start to do that, that's when your score plateau happens. That's when you feel the need to solve hundreds and hundreds of questions, which should not be the case. If you do stage 1 of your preparation well, there is no reason why you won't be able to cement your methods with just a few questions, with just 60 to 70 questions. Okay. So, as I said, he took feedback seriously and accordingly he took corrective actions. And this is verbatim from his debrief, and I'm going to read this. For me, the biggest thing regarding SC was the application of the concepts. My concepts were not bad in attempts 1 and 2, but I lacked the knowledge of application. Concepts can narrow down the options from 5 to 2, but after that, the application of concepts plays a game-changing role. Okay, so really you have to apply this stuff. Now, what I said was that after doing the course, you can get to that 70th percentile ability. But how do you go from 70th to 90th percentile? That's what we will talk about next, okay? Because ultimately your goal is to get to that 90th percentile. You cement the methods utilizing Scholaranium. So using your e-GMAT course, you learn the methods. You learn the methods and the concepts. Now, next, you cement your methods, okay? That's stage 2. Now we're going to talk about how did Rohit Malan reach 90th percentile. He scored a V41. Okay. Now as he went through the course, he scored on an average 90% in all the application files. Only in one of the 23 application files was a score less than 70%. Okay. Now when he came to stage 2, when he came to Scholaranium, look at the number of questions that he needed to attempt. He needed to attempt only 80 questions here. Not more than that. That's what I was talking about. If you do stage 1 properly, you only need to attempt 60 to 80 questions in stage 2 to get to that 90th percentile. The key thing is if you do stage 1 properly. Okay. Now, because Rohit had, and why is that important? Because you need to have that solid launch pad. He had that solid launch pad of 98th percentile and the right method, and that's why he didn't need to solve those hundreds of questions to reach to his target ability. That is the power of data. Okay. That is the power, and how did he do stage 1 correctly? The way Sahil did stage 1 correctly. He took feedback from each and every feedback point. He took corrective actions right there and then. Okay, so that when he was doing things right the first time. He was probing, asking the right questions, doing the right kind of review. And that is possible if you have the right kind of content to prepare with. Alright, so again, what do you need to do to achieve mastery? You need to have the right method first. And you need to be absolutely convinced about that one method that you have to use. Okay, then you need to be very, very critical of yourself. Okay, why do I say that? You need to be critical because you can't just pass off a mistake as saying, oh, that was a silly mistake. No. Oh, I'll just revise this concept. No. You need to do a detailed review of each and every solution that each and every question that you solve. And that detailed review is possible only through the detailed solutions. So that you learn from each and every question that you solve. This is what gets you to that solid launch pad, so that and that is possible by the feedback that you get, okay, from the system. And then as you go to stage 2, you are already on a solid launch pad of 70 percentile, and getting from that 70 to 90th percentile becomes straightforward. You need to continually do strategic review, utilizing the detailed solution, look at the data from Scholaranium so that you're focusing your energy on the right things. All right, so with this, okay, so again, this is Rohit's words. Your e-GMAT course is effective not just because it makes we make impactful video lessons. It's effective because it gives you insights on areas where you need to improve upon and provides tools that help you personalize that journey. Okay, so in summary, again, I'm just putting together everything that we have learned in this session. To score, you need to score that 730 plus in order to get into those top B schools and earn a scholarship, because there is a huge ROI. Okay, $500,000 worth of ROI. Okay, and your GMAT is a test of ability. You need to build ability, and ability is a term not to be used lightly. Okay, it's not your capability to solve questions. Your ability is your ability to solve difficult questions correctly. Okay, for that you need to first get difficult questions, and then you need to be able to solve those questions correctly. Okay, for you to get difficult questions, you need to solve easy and medium questions correctly. Okay, and for that you need to have that consistent method. Personalized study plan defines a path to your target score. Don't waste your time on things that you don't need to prepare for. Okay, create a personalized study plan so that you know what is your path to your target GMAT score. Your path is very different, or could be very different from your friend's path. Okay, don't follow those cookie cutter study plans. You have the power to create your own personalized study plan that is personalized to you, truly to you. Okay, so do that. 4 stages of learning, or learning concepts, learning application. This is what we call as stage 1 in e-GMAT terminology. Mastering application and refinement to perfection. This is what we call as stage 2. Maintaining performance. This is what we call as stage 3. Okay, each of these stages need to be done for each subsection in GMAT, for each of the 5 subsections in the GMAT. To score 90th percentile in any subsection, you need to learn the right methods. Very important. Not multiple strategies. Right method. One method to solve each question in each subsection. Okay. One method to solve all questions in each subsection. Get precise feedback and do strategic review while practicing. Okay. You get over 100 feedback points per subsection. It's up to you what you do with that data, what you do with that feedback that you're getting. You get positive feedback, you get constructive feedback. It's in your stride to take that positive feedback as a reinforcement that you're doing things right. It's in your stride to take that constructive feedback to implement corrective actions. You have detailed solutions in your course so that you can do that strategic review. And you have flexible assessment engine through Scholaranium, through SigmaX mock test. Okay. Any questions that you have with regards to your GMAT strategy or your study plan, write to us at either rajat at e-gmat.com or payal at e-gmat.com. We'll be there to help you get to that 90th percentile in your GMAT attempt. All right, so with that, I've come to the end of this webinar, and I will open up. I'm going to share the feedback. I'm going to share the PDF with you. I would also want you to put in your feedback over here, if I can just get the poll. Don't have a poll for that, okay? Let me just create one. So it would be nice if you could tell me, what did you like in this webinar? What was the new stuff that you learned, or just your feedback in general? All right, any questions that you have for either Rajat or I, you can feel free to post them in the Q&A pod. Okay. So strategic review is new for you. Great insights, feedback points, and their application. Good. I'm so glad that you were able to get that from the webinar. Yeah. Also, eye-opener, this will definitely help improve SC. Well, the same thing applies to all the other subsections too. We just took one example in SC. We use the SC as a single example, but again, same thing applies to CR, same thing applies to everything in quant. So it's for me as student to analyze each answer choice and learn. Very good, very good. Thank you very much. I think Rajat is also there in this session, in the webinar right now. Let me see if he'd like to add anything over here.
Well, thank you, Payal. So first of all, thank you everyone for the feedback. The feedback's really good. I think the inputs when I see people saying I missed doing strategic review, and I understand the impact it'll have on my preparation. I always thought 720 plus is unachievable in 2 months of preparation. Now I have confidence. I think those are things which are really important for us, because that's what we plan to impart. Also, our goal is to dispel notions about, hey, how the GMAT is, about the importance of timing on the GMAT versus ability, and so on and so forth. So it's good to really see this feedback. When you do that, it allows us to modulate these webinars to serve your needs better. The other thing I see are some questions in the Q&A pod. Shishir says, I'm planning to buy OG 2020, which will be a better book, a hardcover or an ebook. Shishir, again, I prefer to solve questions online. You get the online tool with either. So, either one's good, frankly, as long as you solve questions online. Okay. Payal, I think you're not muted at your end. So, then Mateen says, I've been out of quant studies for quite some time. How many months do you think it'll suggest as an estimate? Mateen, let's say you're going to start at a 25th percentile. You're looking at about you're looking at an estimate in about 170 to 200 hours of effort on quant. So it just depends on essentially how many hours can you put in a week. So if you're looking at 200 hours, if you can put in 20 hours a week, then you're looking at about 10 weeks of effort over there. If you put in 30 hours a week, then of course it's the effort comes down to about 8 weeks or so, and so on and so forth. Which section would you start? Would I recommend that you start with? So the way we do this is we kind of divide this between quant and verbal, and what we say is start with one, finish that, and go forward. But typically we say start with your strength, make sure that you achieve the target score over there, and then go towards your weakness. It does two things. One is because you're starting with a point of strength, you typically would finish that in a much shorter span of time. The second thing that it does is that it ensures that you maximize your strength, which is the first principle when it comes to building a good strategy. Now, if you're not strong in either quant or verbal, then just pick one section and excel in it. So Anna, hopefully that helps. Again, make sure that you register for the webinar next week or tomorrow even. Remember this that the SC webinar tomorrow will will have similar strategic review, but for many more questions. It's going to go in a lot more detail than what we did today. Similarly, on the algebra webinar. Which is there tomorrow. So 24 hours from actually 25 hours from now, from the time that this particular webinar started, you're going to really see when you make a mistake, why you make a mistake, what causes that mistake, in very similar terms to what you saw in the strategic review in SC. Rakshit says, does stage one and stage two of each subsection go one after the other? Yes, that they do. That's when it makes logical sense. If you do just stage one of one subsection and move on to another subsection, so if you move from SC learning concepts and methods to CR learning concepts and methods, you're going to lose what you learned in SC because you've not cemented those methods and achieve that perfection. So make sure you cement methods. So we really say you can move from one subsection to the other once you achieve that 70th percentile, because that's when the methods and the concepts both are cemented enough that you don't lose it. So for people who really say, I study for one thing, I remember this, then I move on to the other thing, I forget what I studied earlier. It happens because essentially without cementing, you move from one subsection to the other. Rohit says, I finished my quant and midway with verbal. I might take 2 more weeks, but I have my exam in around 3 weeks. What's the best that I can do? Rohit, sorry, good question. The thing that you have to do is make a choice. So again, one thing that you probably, as an inference from this webinar, is as on the GMAT, whatever you do, you need to achieve perfection over there. So it's better to do like if out of the 5 subsections, it's better to excel on 4 and do somewhat okay on 5 than trying to excel on all 5. So that's something which is there. If you look at the success story of this one student that I've just shared, it should be popping up. This guy, while studying for the GMAT, he actually approached a couple of weeks ahead of his GMAT attempt, and we evaluated his account and said, don't focus on PNC probability sets and all of that stuff. Focus on whatever you've done, excel in that, and that was a relief to that guy because he was struggling to do everything, and because he was struggling to do everything, he wasn't perfecting anything. So that's something which is there. Uh, I'm going to take Rakshit's question, then Anand, I'm going to take your question. Rakshit says, what plan would you suggest? I finished stage one for all or all subsections. Again, unfortunately, Rakshit, I hope you would have done stage one and stage two. But again, start with a subsection. Again, the principle remains the same. Build on your strengths first. The subsection that you're most comfortable with, do stage two, excel over there, then start with the next most comfortable subsection, then start with the third. And that's how I would recommend that you do. That's one approach. The other is the subsection that you finish last. Make sure you do cementing with that. Then you do cementing for the subsection that you think you are the best in, that you're most comfortable in. Does that help, Rakshit? Either approach. But again, the principle is let's build on your strengths first. Yeah. A good question. I'm sure there are a few other folks who are in the same boat as you are. So, role of GMAT in scholarship when it comes to a part-time MBA. Part-time MBA is really practically has zero scholarship money. I'll tell you that. There's good scholarship money for full-time MBA. So the first question that I'd ask is when it comes to the scholar to your school, the school that you're applying to, or the schools that you're applying to, do they have a scholarship kitty for a part-time MBA? I've not heard that they do, and that's for good reason. If you're doing a part-time MBA, what you're telling the B school is that I'm happy with what I'm doing, um, and and uh, and essentially what I want to do is I want to continue in my career, which is already paying me enough. I want to accelerate my growth in my career, and if your job's paying you enough, then it should be enough for to pay for a part-time MBA. So that's kind of how part-time MBAs work. I've seen students with really high scores. I haven't seen them get scholarships for part-time MBAs. It's very rare, is what I would say. Um, yeah, and then that's kind of what I would say. Again, the question really is part-time versus full-time. Are you looking for a career change or a career acceleration? And then I think that's kind of where the entire question is. Swati says, good question, Swati. I've completed the SC course from e-GMAT. However, I'm still don't have a good score in test. Do you recommend that I go through application files again? So, Swati, first of all, I'm really glad you recognize this. It's really good to recognize this at this stage and do this. So, what I would recommend that you do, I'm going to share a video with you, is what we call as a revision B. So, let me see if I can share that video. Um, uh, let's go into. Okay, Swati, while I do that, let me, or if Payal is here, I can really just, Swati, can you just write to us? We have a video for this, which we call revision B. And I want to make sure that I get that video for you. It's built just for you. Actually, I think I found it. Here's a video for revision B. Where's Swati? Yes. Um, Swati, I'm going to respond to Pooja's message because your message has your email address. Okay. IR section, we have the world's most comprehensive IR course. You shouldn't need anything beyond that. Um, so Sharad says, I'm done with e-GMAT Quant, now left with CR and Verbal. Please suggest a further path where I can take the GMAT by November end. So Sharad, I mean, if you're left with CR and Verbal, then finish CR and Verbal and make sure you take the Sigma X marks. And I think that's where you should be. I think the key question which you have to really say is, hey, where are your current ability levels and how different are they from your target ability levels? And then that will help you focus your energy. I'm going to share a success story of a student who improved from 700 to 770 in 3 weeks. Look at the approach that this guy took to do that. I think that's something that would be beneficial to you as well. So you can also watch his video interview on YouTube. Rohit says, I have my exam on 26th of December. I'm not much confident. Any help, Rohit? Again, focus on learning. You still have a lot of time before your exam. Focus on learning, do one subsection at a time, and get there. I mean, I'm going to share a success story which I shared sometime earlier, of this guy who's working 45 plus hours a week. He could study just 1 hour per day, and he was able to improve to 730. Again, confidence is one thing. You have to believe in yourself if you want to ace the GMAT. If you want to get to that 90th percentile, you've got to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, you're not going to be on the top 10 or the top 3 or the top 4 percentile of students. That's just the prerequisite. Santanu says, I have 12 years of work experience uh, in the power industry. Is there any particular course where my work ex to would be utilized? Santanu, if you, I'd recommend you look at schools in Texas, and I think uh, again, actually, let me take a step back. What is your work experience? Your work experience is composed of two things: your knowledge in a particular vertical, and your in general managerial and maturity piece. So it just depends on what you want to do going forward. And and so we have actually written an article, if I believe. Let me share this article. Here's the article. Take a look at that. You'd see the list of business schools ranked over there. So Nahush says, should I take up Sigma X mocks every 2 weeks, considering I have 2 months of prep time left? Nahush, no, you should not. Sigma X mocks are to be taken once you are done with 80% of the subsections. So just because you have mocks doesn't mean you should take them. Remember, you also have this practice on Scholaranium. You also have a lot of things over there. So again, I'm going to share another video with you, or I'm going to actually share a channel with you where there are about 5 videos. I plan to put another 15 or so videos, which really, these videos talk about how data and methods power success. And what you're going to really see is these are people who are high achieving students, and they don't finish the course. They focus on doing the stage as well. So that's what your focus needs to be as well. Okay. So again, it's about doing the stage as well, not just finishing the content. Swati says, I'm not following my personalized study plan. I've completed sentence correction. Should I give a mock again to plan my studies ahead? So Swati, make sure you, again, since you've completed sentence correction, I want to make sure you do the cementing. You get done with sentence correction, then take a Sigma X mock and plan your studies. Yes, that would be a perfectly valid way. Yes. Raksha says, by following plan A during stage 2, do I need to refer to all the concepts in the related file and notes related file apart from concept practice? Raksha, you shouldn't refer to, but I think the dashboard has a great data, as a number of data points. So if there are concepts in which you scored less, do revise them. But other than that, do concept practice, and the concept practice quiz will tell you the areas where you need effort in and will guide you. Again, that's the personalized feedback that allows you to personalize your learning over there. So take the concept practice quizzes in each module. There are about 20 concept practice quizzes in 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 um, in the sentence correction course. Similar number in critical reasoning. You're going to find about 9 to 10 in each of the quant courses. Use the data from there. You also have data for each of the concept files. So if you've scored more than 80% in the concept files, you don't need to do that. If there are concept files you've scored 60%, I would recommend that you revise those. And again, watch the video of how data and methods power success, the channel that I just shared. Now, Hush says, I'm a sales and marketing executive with 10 plus years of B2B experience. Should I apply to USB schools considering the visa issues? to non-IT professionals, or should I uh, or should I consider UK? I think so. Top schools uh, visas are not an issue. So let me just explain to you what visa issues are. If you are an Infosys, if you are so H-1B visa issues exist for Infosys, Satyam, all the Indian outsourcing firms. There, the H-1B rejection rate is about 35% to and goes to as high as 50%. However, however, companies such as Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and in fact, finance companies, consulting companies, there the H-1B rejection rate is about 3 to 4%. It's no higher than that. And these are numbers that I saw today morning. And these are companies that recruit at top Indian business or top US business schools, I'm sorry. So when it comes to H-1B visa, that's something that if you get to a top B school, you're going to be fine. In fact, if you look at employment stats from top B schools, you're going to find that most of the international students get a job within 3 months. In fact, many of them get a job way before 3 months. That's the experience that we've had from our students. If you're not in top B schools, you will struggle. That's something which we've seen. So that's H-1B visa. Now, when it comes to green card, yes, there is a delay, which means 7 years into your employment, there's going to be a delay. But essentially, if you get a great job over here, frankly, you can move to any continent in the world. You'll have opportunities. So that's kind of the short end of it. Now, when it comes to UK has just this year, I think a few months back they changed the law where you do an MBA over there, you get two years to get a job. There's a really great path to a work visa as well as citizenship overall in UK. So I mean, from a work visa standpoint, to get a job right after your MBA, both places are good. UK has a much more definitive path towards citizenship, so does Canada compared to the US. US has a bit more of a wait time right now over here. Uh, but when it comes to starting salaries, when it comes to lower taxes, you save a lot more money in the US. And then I'm going to probably write an article outlining all of that math. So both places are great. Nahush, as long as you get to top schools at those places, I think you're going to be in a good place. I don't know if you're looking for that longer response, but hopefully that helps. Okay, guys, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. It was a pleasure having you guys, truly. We have the algebra webinar tomorrow. I hope to see many of you tomorrow in the algebra webinar. And having said that, study well, prepare for the GMAT, get that 730 plus score, and get into top business schools. That's all that we want. Bye bye, and have a good evening.